Millionaire alien mom dropped her plate after seeing her paralyzed daughter walk. Thanks to Jacob Matthews stood at the imposing gates of the Thalia estate, clutching his employment contract and wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The mansion sprawled across the hilltop like a sleeping beast, all gleaming spires and sweeping terraces that seemed to defy Earth architecture. But then again, this wasn't an Earth family. "You must be the new house assistant," said a voice from the intercom. The gates swung open with a soft hum. "Lady Asara is expecting you." Jacob straightened his shoulders and walked up the curved driveway. At 32, he'd bounced between jobs in biotech research and physical therapy before his funding got cut. When the employment agency had called with this position, live-in assistant for a wealthy alien widow, he'd almost laughed. But the salary had wiped the smile right off his face. The massive front door opened before he could knock. A humanoid butler with 4 arms and skin the color of burnished copper nodded at him. "Mr. Matthews, I am Pax, head of household staff. Lady Asara is in a business meeting. I'll show you to your quarters and brief you on your duties." Jacob followed Pax through corridors lined with artwork that seemed to shift and move when viewed from different angles. The mansion was a blend of alien luxury and Earth comforts, clearly designed for a family that appreciated both worlds. "Lady Asara is Cerulean, from the Proxima system," Pax explained as they walked. "Her late husband was a trade ambassador who brought her to Earth 15 years ago. After his passing last year, she decided to remain here with their daughter." "The daughter," Jacob said carefully. "I was told she requires special assistance." Pax's expression softened. "Miss Liena, she's 12 Earth years, a beautiful child. There was an accident during a shuttle malfunction 3 years ago. Her father was killed instantly, and she suffered severe spinal trauma. Lady Asara has consulted every specialist on and off-world." They stopped at a door at the end of a hallway. "These are your quarters. Your primary duties will include assisting Miss Liena with her daily activities, managing her therapy schedule, and occasional household tasks as needed. Lady Asara runs several interplanetary businesses and is often occupied." Jacob's room was spacious and comfortable, with a separate office area equipped with advanced tech. After settling in, Pax led him to meet Liena. The girl's room was bright and cheerful, filled with books, holographic displays, and what looked like science projects in various stages of completion. Liena herself sat in a hovering wheelchair by the window, her skin a lighter blue than her mother's, almost periwinkle, with silver hair that seemed to float around her head like a halo. Large, curious eyes turned toward him as he entered. "You're the new assistant?" she asked, her voice musical. "The last one quit after I corrected his understanding of quantum physics." Jacob couldn't help but smile. "I'm Jacob Matthews, and I'm pretty sure my understanding of quantum physics could use some correction." Liena's serious expression broke into a grin. "I like you already. Can you help me with my exoskeleton fitting? The medical technicians adjusted it yesterday, but it's still not calibrated properly." Jacob crossed the room and examined the lightweight frame beside her wheelchair. It was cutting-edge tech, but something about the neural interface looked off. "Who designed this?" he asked, frowning. "The best doctors on 3 planets," came a melodic voice from the doorway. Jacob turned to see Lady Asara standing there, and his breath caught. She was tall and graceful, her blue skin deeper and richer than her daughter's, like the depths of an ocean. Her silver white hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and she wore a simple brown dress that somehow made her look like royalty. "Lady Asara," he said, straightening. "Jacob Matthews, thank you for this opportunity." Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a striking violet, assessed him coolly. "Mr. Matthews, your credentials are impressive. I hope you'll be more persistent than your predecessors." "Mom," Liena said with a sigh, "you scared the others away." A flicker of a smile crossed Asara's face. "Nonsense. They simply weren't qualified." She turned back to Jacob. "Dinner is at 7. Liena will show you her routine." After she left, Liena rolled her eyes. "She's not always so formal. She's just protective." Jacob nodded, turning his attention back to the exoskeleton. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the device. "Please, it's supposed to help me stand, but the neural interface keeps misfiring." As Jacob examined the equipment more closely, his mind was already racing with modifications. His background in neurobiology hadn't been mentioned in his resume. It was part of his unfinished doctorate. but he could see immediately what was wrong with the design. "The interface is treating your nervous system like a human one," he murmured. "The calibration is all wrong for cerulean physiology." Lena's eyes widened. "That's what I've been trying to tell them. Our neural pathways are similar but not identical." Jacob spent the rest of the afternoon getting to know Lena in her daily routine. The girl was brilliant, curious, and surprisingly resilient despite her condition. By dinner, he'd already started sketching modifications to her exoskeleton in his mind. At the dining table, Lady Sarah asked pointed questions about his experience and qualifications. Jacob answered honestly, though he downplayed his interest in the exoskeleton. Something told him that Lady Sarah had given up hope on technological solutions. Later that night, as Jacob settled into his new quarters, he pulled out his tablet and began researching cerulean physiology. If the doctors on 3 planets couldn't help Lena walk again, maybe they were overthinking the problem. He had nothing to lose by trying, and from the determined look in Lena's eyes, he knew she hadn't given up either. Over the next few weeks, Jacob settled into a rhythm at the Thalia estate. By day, he diligently performed his duties as Lena's assistant, helping with her exercises and studies. By night, he transformed into something entirely different, a covert biomedical engineer. His quarters had become a makeshift laboratory. Components borrowed from the mansion's extensive tech storage were arranged across his desk alongside schematics of cerulean physiology he'd downloaded from medical databases. Jacob worked late into each night, careful to erase his search history and hide his work before morning. "What are you always doing in here?" Lena asked one afternoon, her hovering wheelchair humming softly as she appeared in his doorway unexpectedly. Jacob quickly swept his tablet screen clear. "Just some personal research. Shouldn't you be at your music lesson?" "Cancelled. Instructor has some weird alien flu." Lena maneuvered closer, her curious eyes scanning his desk. "That looks like neural interface wiring. Are you building something?" Jacob hesitated. He hadn't planned to involve Lena yet, but her brilliant mind could be an asset. Plus, he needed information about cerulean physiology that wasn't available in public databases. "Can you keep a secret?" he asked finally. Her face lit up. "From Mom?" "Absolutely." He showed her the preliminary designs for the exoskeleton, explaining his theory about why the previous models had failed. "They're treating your nervous system like a human one, but cerulean neural pathways transmit signals differently. I think I can modify this interface to speak your language, so to speak." Lena's eyes widened. "You're trying to make me walk again?" "I'm trying," Jacob emphasized. "No promises, but yes, that's the goal." The girl was quiet for a long moment, then whispered, "Mom's given up, you know. She doesn't think anything will work anymore." "That's why this stays between us," Jacob said gently. "No point getting her hopes up until we know it works." Lena nodded solemnly, then a mischievous smile spread across her face. "I have something that might help you understand Mom better." That evening, Lena accidentally knocked over a decorative box in her room while Jacob was helping her organize books, spilling several leather-bound journals onto the floor. "Oops," she said, not sounding sorry at all. Jacob bent to help gather them. "What are these?" "Mom's journals," Lena said quietly. "She doesn't know I have them. After Dad died and I got hurt, she started writing everything down because she said her heart was too full to keep it all inside." Jacob immediately tried to hand them back. "Lena, these are private. We shouldn't—" "I'm not saying read all of them," she interrupted, her large eyes pleading. "Just maybe the one from last month? She seems so sad all the time, and I thought if you understood her better, maybe you could help make her happy again." Jacob hesitated, his conscience warring with his curiosity. Lady Sarah maintained a polite but distant relationship with him, though he occasionally caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Please," Lena added, "I just want her to be happy again." With a sigh, Jacob took the most recent journal. "I'll just look at the last entry." That's it. Later that night, alone in his quarters, Jacob stared at the journal on his desk. This was a terrible invasion of privacy. He should return it immediately. Instead, he opened it to the last entry. The human assistant is different from the others. He looks at Lena like she's a person, not a problem to solve. Today I found him explaining orbital mechanics using fruit from the kitchen, and she was laughing, actually laughing. I haven't heard that sound in so long. When he speaks to me, he meets my eyes without the usual human discomfort around non-terrestrials. There's something about him that reminds me of Kalen, not in appearance, but in spirit. That quiet determination. It's unsettling. I find myself noticing things I shouldn't. The way his muscles move beneath his shirt when he helps Liana with her exercises. How his eyes crinkle when he smiles. These thoughts are inappropriate and unprofessional. I am his employer, and Liana needs stability, not complications. Jacob closed the journal, his heart racing. He'd noticed Lady Sarah too. How could he not? Her grace, her fierce devotion to her daughter, even her formal reserve had begun to fascinate him. But he'd never imagined she might feel the same pull. He set the journal aside and returned to his secret project with renewed determination. The standard models treated the nervous system as a simple electrical circuit, but cerulean physiology incorporated something closer to bioluminescent pathways. His modifications were promising, but he needed more specialized components. The next morning at breakfast, Lady Sarah reviewed her schedule with Pax, while Jacob helped Liana with her meal. "I'll be in meetings off-world until late tonight," Sarah announced. "The Proxima trade negotiations are at a critical stage." "We'll be fine, Mom," Lena assured her. "Jacob's going to help me with my science project today." Asara's violet eyes met Jacob's briefly. "Thank you for your dedication, Mr. Matthews. Lena seems happier since your arrival." "She's an extraordinary kid," Jacob replied honestly. "It's my pleasure." Something flickered in Asara's expression. Warmth, perhaps, or gratitude, before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Pax will handle any household matters in my absence." After she departed in her private shuttle, Lena turned to Jacob with excitement. "This is perfect. We have all day to work on the exoskeleton." Jacob smiled at her enthusiasm. "First, your actual studies. Then, if there's time, we'll run some tests." As they worked through Leanna's lessons, Jacob found himself thinking about Asara's journal entry. The attraction he felt wasn't one-sided after all, but pursuing anything would be complicated, not just because she was his employer, but because his secret project could be seen as a betrayal of her trust. Still, when he looked at Leanna's hopeful face as they began testing neural response patterns that afternoon, he knew he couldn't stop now. If there was even a chance he could help her walk again, he had to try, for Lena's sake, and maybe, just maybe, to see Asara truly smile for the first time since he'd arrived. Jacob was putting the finishing touches on his latest exoskeleton modifications when the message from Pax arrived on his tablet. "Lady Asara requests your presence for dinner in the private dining room at 8 p.m. Formal attire required." He stared at the screen, pulse quickening. The private dining room was reserved for Asara's most important business associates or personal guests. In the 2 months he'd worked at the estate, he'd never been invited there. "She's on to us," Liana declared dramatically when he showed her the message. They'd narrowly avoided discovery that afternoon when Asara had returned early from her business trip, forcing them to hastily hide their prototype under a blanket. "Maybe she just wants to discuss your progress," Jacob suggested, though he didn't entirely believe it himself. Liana rolled her eyes. "Mom doesn't need the private dining room for that. She's either going to fire you or—" The girl's expression turned sly. "Or she has other intentions." "Liana!" Jacob felt his face flush. "What?" "I'm 12, not stupid. She looks at you the way characters in romance holovids look at each other." Liana spun her wheelchair in a small circle. "Besides, ceruleans are much more practical about attraction than humans. We don't waste time with your complicated courtship rituals." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "And what would you know about courtship rituals?" "I read," she said primly, "and Mom's journals are very educational." At precisely 8 p.m., Jacob arrived at the private dining room wearing the formal attire Pax had delivered to his quarters. A tailored suit that fit him perfectly, though he couldn't recall ever being measured for it. The room was intimate, lit by floating orbs that cast a warm glow over the small table, set for two. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking view of the valley below and the distant city lights. Asara stood by the windows, her back to him, wearing a flowing dress the color of Earth's oceans at twilight. Her silver-white hair cascaded freely down her back instead of being pulled into its usual elegant twist. "You requested my presence, Lady Asara." Jacob said formally. She turned and the sight of her nearly stole his breath. The dress shimmered with her movements, clinging to her graceful form before flowing to the floor. "Jacob," she said using his first name, "thank you for joining me. And please, when we're alone, it's just a Sarah." She gestured to the table where an array of dishes, some recognizably Earth cuisine, others clearly cerulean, awaited them. A bottle of the iridescent blue star wine he'd seen in her office sat chilling beside two glasses. As they ate, Ezra asked pointed questions about his background, his education, his previous work. Jacob answered truthfully, though carefully avoiding any mention of his current project with Leanna. "You know," she said, refilling his glass with star wine, "your resume didn't mention your expertise in neurobiology or exoskeleton design." Jacob nearly choked on his drink. It wasn't relevant to the position." "Wasn't it?" Her violet eyes held his, unblinking. "A house assistant for a paralyzed child with extensive nerve damage?" "I didn't want to give the impression I was looking to experiment," he admitted. "Most people are uncomfortable with researchers who've had their funding cut." Isara nodded slowly. "And yet you and Leanna have been spending an unusual amount of time in your quarters recently. Working on her science project, I believe?" Jacob set down his glass, hard hammering. "Isara, I'm not angry, Jacob," she interrupted, her voice softening. "I'm curious. Leanna seems happier than I've seen her in years, more hopeful. Whatever you're doing, it's having a positive effect." Relief washed over him, followed quickly by guilt. "I should have been more transparent with you." "Yes, you should have." She rose from her chair and moved to stand beside the windows again. "Ceruleans value honesty above most other virtues, but we also value results." Jacob joined her at the window, close enough to catch the subtle, intoxicating scent that seemed uniquely hers, something like vanilla and starlight, if starlight had a scent. "I've been developing a modified neural interface," he confessed. "The existing models treat cerulean physiology like human physiology with minor adjustments. But your neural pathways are fundamentally different. They're more luminescent, reactive to emotional states as well as electrical impulses." Isara turned to face him, surprise evident in her expression. "You determined this on your own?" "With Leanna's help," he acknowledged. "She's brilliant, you know." "I know." A small smile curved her lips. "She takes after her father that way." "And her mother," Jacob added boldly. Their eyes locked, and the air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Jacob became acutely aware of how close they stood, how the light played across her blue skin, how her chest rose and fell with each breath. "Humans are remarkable creatures," Zara murmured. "So determined, so passionate. Kalen, my husband, used to say that what humans lack in lifespan, they make up for in intensity of purpose." "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" Jacob asked, his voice low. "An observation." Her gaze dropped briefly to his lips, then back to his eyes. "Ceruleans live nearly twice as long as humans. We tend to take our time with things. And humans rush in?" He smiled slightly. "Sometimes rushing has its advantages." Her hand rose to rest lightly against his chest, where she must have felt his heart racing. "Your emotional responses are so immediate, so honest. It's fascinating." Jacob covered her hand with his own. "Sarah, I should tell you that you've been reading my journals," she finished, her expression unreadable. He froze. "How did you—" "Leanna is many things, but subtle isn't one of them." A hint of amusement colored her voice. "I've known for weeks that she's been borrowing them." Mortification washed over Jacob. "I only read one entry. I shouldn't have—" "No, you shouldn't have," she agreed. "But I find I'm not as upset as I should be." Her fingers curled slightly against his chest. "What did you think of what you read?" The star wine had loosened his inhibitions just enough for honesty. "I thought I wasn't alone in feeling something I shouldn't." The space between them disappeared as Sarah leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly deepened. Jacob's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the warmth of her body seeped into his. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isara's skin seemed to glow from within, luminescent patterns tracing beneath the surface. A cerulean response to intense emotion, he realized. I've wanted to do that since your second week here, she admitted, her voice husky. Why didn't you? He asked, tracing the glowing patterns on her arm with gentle fingers. Because I'm your employer. Because of Liana. Because I wasn't sure if humans and ceruleans. She trailed off. If we're compatible, Jacob finished, a smile playing at his lips. I think we just answered that question. Isara's answering laugh was musical. Perhaps we should conduct further research. For scientific purposes, of course. Of course, he agreed solemnly, though his eyes danced with humor. Thorough investigation is essential. As they moved toward the door together, Isara's hand firmly in his, Jacob knew two things with certainty. His secret project for Liana had just become considerably more complicated, and whatever was beginning between him and Isara transcended the boundaries of employer and employee, human and alien. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating, and he wouldn't change it for anything. The morning after their dinner together, Jacob woke with renewed determination. The memory of Isara's kiss, the luminescent patterns that had traced across her blue skin in response to their shared passion, fueled his resolve to complete the exoskeleton. He wanted to give her something no amount of wealth could buy. Hope. They hadn't discussed his secret project again. Instead, they'd spent the night exploring the fascinating differences between human and cerulean physiology in the most intimate way possible. Jacob smiled at the memory of Isara's astonishment at human stamina and his own wonder at the way her entire body could glow with pleasure at the right touch. Ceruleans typically take relationships slowly, she had whispered against his neck as they lay tangled together. We consider, we contemplate, we wait. And what do you think of the human approach now? He had asked, trailing his fingers along the glowing patterns on her arm. Her laugh had been low and sensual. I think there's something to be said for rushing in. Now, as Jacob made final adjustments to the exoskeleton in his quarters, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt for continuing to keep it secret. But Liana had been adamant. Mom's tried everything, she had insisted. She can't take another disappointment. We have to be sure it works before we show her. The door slid open, and Liana's wheelchair hummed as she entered, her face alight with excitement. Is it ready? Mom's at the Interplanetary Trade Summit all day. We have the perfect opportunity to test it. Jacob nodded, holding up the sleek device. He'd redesigned it completely from the standard models, incorporating elements that would work with cerulean neural pathways rather than against them. The interface now responded to the same bioluminescent signals that caused Isara's skin to glow with emotion. It's ready, he confirmed. But Liana, I need you to understand, this is still experimental. It might not work perfectly the first time. I know, she said solemnly, but we have to try. They moved to the mansion's medical suite, which Jacob had secretly prepared earlier that morning. Liana transferred from her wheelchair to the examination table with practiced ease, her eyes never leaving the exoskeleton. It's so much smaller than the others, she observed as Jacob began attaching the components to her legs and lower back. The others were trying to override your nervous system, he explained. This one works with it instead. The neural interface is calibrated specifically to cerulean physiology. As he worked, Jacob explained each component. The girl listened intently, asking surprisingly sophisticated questions about the technology. Her intelligence reminded him so much of Isara that it made his chest ache with affection for them both. Okay, he said finally, stepping back. The system is online. Can you feel anything? Liana's brow furrowed in concentration. It's warm, and there's a sort of tingling where the nodes connect to my spine. Good. That means the interface is establishing connection with your neural pathways. Jacob checked the readings on his tablet. Now, I want you to think about moving your right foot. Don't try to actually move it yet. Just think about the movement. Liana nodded, her face a mask of concentration. On the tablet, Jacob watched as neural signals began flowing through the interface. The exoskeleton's indicators shifted from red to yellow. It's working, he breathed. The signals are getting through. I can feel it, Liana whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. It's like my legs are waking up from a long sleep. Let's try something simple. Think about flexing your toes. To both their amazement, Liana's toes moved slightly. The girl gasped, tears springing to her eyes. I did it! Jacob, I did it! Encouraged, they spent the next hour working through basic movements, ankle rotations, knee bends, small lifts. Each success brought more confidence, more tears of joy from Liana, more validation of Jacob's theory. "I think we're ready to try standing," he said finally, "but I'll support you the whole time." He helped Liana to the edge of the table, positioning himself in front of her with his hands ready to catch her if needed. "Remember, the exoskeleton will help, but you need to guide it with your thoughts. Imagine standing up just like we practiced." Liana closed her eyes, her face serene with concentration. Slowly, the exoskeleton hummed to life, and her legs straightened. Jacob kept his hands hovering near her arms, but didn't touch her as she gradually rose to a standing position. "Open your eyes," he said softly. Liana's eyes fluttered open, and she looked down in wonder at her own 2 feet supporting her weight. "I'm standing," she whispered, then louder. "I'm standing." "You're doing it all yourself," Jacob told her, his own eyes misting. "The exoskeleton is just helping translate your thoughts into movement. Can I try walking?" "Small steps," he cautioned. "I'll be right here." With painstaking care, Liana lifted her right foot and moved it forward. Then the left. Right again. Left again. Each step became more confident than the last until she was walking slowly around the medical suite, Jacob hovering nearby but not touching her. "It works," she kept saying, tears streaming down her face. "It really works." They practiced for another hour until Liana was moving with relative ease, though still somewhat mechanically. By the time they finished, she could walk the length of the room and back with only minimal support. "Mom comes home at 7, Liana said as Jacob helped her back into her wheelchair. They had decided she would use it until the big reveal, to conserve her strength. "I want to surprise her in the main hallway. I want to walk to her, Jacob. Are you sure? We could practice more first." "I'm sure," she interrupted, her eyes shining with determination. "I've waited 3 years to walk to my mother." "I'm not waiting another day." Jacob couldn't argue with that. They spent the rest of the afternoon refining her movements and planning the surprise. As 7 o'clock approached, Jacob helped Liana into the exoskeleton one more time, concealing it beneath a long, flowing dress. "Pax says she's just pulled into the driveway," he told her, checking his tablet. "Are you ready?" Liana nodded, her face a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I've been ready for 3 years." They positioned themselves in the main hallway, just out of sight of the entrance. Jacob stood beside Liana, ready to steady her if needed, but determined to let her accomplish this moment on her own. The front door opened. They heard Sarah's voice thanking the driver, the sound of her heels on the marble floor, the rustle of her clothing as she removed her coat. "Liana!" "Jacob," she called. "I've brought dinner from that Earth restaurant you both like." Liana squeezed Jacob's hand, then stepped forward into the hallway, standing on her own 2 feet. As Sarah rounded the corner, a large plate of food in her hands, her attention on balancing the various containers. She looked up, and the world seemed to stop. Her daughter, her paralyzed daughter, was standing. Not just standing, but taking a step forward. Then another. "Mom," Liana said, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at me. I can walk." The plate slipped from Asara's fingers, crashing to the floor and shattering into pieces. Her violet eyes were wide with disbelief, her mouth open in shock. "Liana," she whispered. "How?" Jacob stepped forward, his heart pounding as he watched the moment unfold. The moment that would change everything. "How?" Isara whispered again, stepping over the shattered plate, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "How is this possible?" Liana took another tentative step forward, her face radiant with joy. "Jacob made it for me. He understood what all those fancy doctors didn't." Asara's gaze shifted to Jacob, her expression a complex mixture of wonder, gratitude, and something darker. Hurt, perhaps, or betrayal. "You did this behind my back?" Her voice was carefully controlled, but Jacob could see the luminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsing with conflicting emotions. "Mom!" Liana protested. "He did what no one else could. I can walk." "I see that," Sarah said softly, kneeling to embrace her daughter. Tears streamed down her blue cheeks as she held Liana close. "It's a miracle. She looked up at Jacob over Liana's shoulder. "I need to understand why the secrecy." The celebration that followed was subdued, Pax ordered replacement food while Jacob explained the exoskeleton's function to Asara, who listened with scientific precision, asking detailed questions about the neural interface. Her technical knowledge surprised him. She understood concepts that had taken him years to master. After Leanna reluctantly went to bed, still wearing the exoskeleton beneath her nightclothes, "Just for tonight, Mom, please?" Asara led Jacob to her private study. "You lied to me," she said without preamble, pouring herself a glass of star wine, but not offering him any. "I didn't lie," Jacob countered. "I just didn't tell you everything." In Cerulean culture, that distinction doesn't exist. Her violet eyes were cool. "You shared my bed while keeping secrets that affected my daughter's life." Jacob flinched. "I was afraid of giving you false hope. Leanna told me how many treatments had failed, how many experts had promised results and delivered nothing. So you decided what information I was entitled to? About my own daughter?" The luminescent patterns beneath her skin flared with anger. "I was wrong," Jacob admitted, "but my intentions were good. I wanted to be certain before I said anything." Asara sighed, her anger visibly ebbing. "Your intentions? Yes. Humans place such emphasis on intentions." She took a sip of her wine. "Ceruleans judge actions, not intentions. The outcome matters more than the motivation. And the outcome is that Leanna can walk," Jacob said gently. "Yes." A small smile finally curved her lips. "She can walk. You gave her back something I thought was lost forever." She set down her glass and moved closer to him. "For that, I am grateful beyond words. But you're still angry." "I'm adjusting my understanding of you." She reached out, tracing his jawline with cool fingers. "Humans are more complicated than I realized." Their conversation was interrupted by Pax appearing at the door. "Lady Asara, there's an urgent communication from Director Valen of the Cerulean Trade Commission." Asara frowned. "At this hour, put it through to my office terminal." Jacob waited while she took the call in private, using the time to examine the artifacts in her study. Most from Earth, he noticed. She collected human art, human literature. It seemed Asara had been fascinated by his species long before he arrived. When she returned, her expression was troubled. "That was unexpected. It seems news of Leanna's recovery has already spread. How is that possible?" "It just happened." "The household staff," she explained. "They're loyal, but news this significant." She shook her head. "Ceruleans value information exchange. It's considered a social good to share important developments." "And Leanna walking is definitely an important development," Jacob acknowledged. "More than you realize." Asara paced the room. "The neural interface you've developed, it could help thousands of Ceruleans with similar injuries. Our physiology makes conventional treatments ineffective, as you discovered." "That's wonderful," Jacob said, confused by her concern. "Isn't it?" "It would be, except for Norin Kallax." Her voice hardened on the name. "He's a rival businessman who's been trying to acquire my company for years. He specializes in medical technology and has invested millions in failed treatments similar to what you've created. If he learns the details of your design, he'll try to steal it," Jacob finished, understanding dawning. "Precisely. And Valen just informed me that Kallax has requested a meeting with me tomorrow, ostensibly about trade regulations, but the timing is suspicious." Jacob's protective instincts flared. "We need to secure the design, document everything." Asara nodded, but her attention seemed elsewhere. She moved to the window, staring out at the night sky. "There's something else. Something I've never told anyone, not even Leanna." Jacob joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance given her earlier anger. "What is it?" "The shuttle accident that killed Kaylin and paralyzed Leanna." Her voice faltered. "I never believed it was an accident. The investigation found evidence of tampering, but nothing conclusive enough to pursue charges." "You think Kallax was responsible?" Jacob asked, horrified. "I could never prove it, but the timing was suspicious. Kaylin had just developed a revolutionary propulsion system that would have made my company the dominant force in interstellar transport. After his death, the prototype mysteriously disappeared from our research facility." Jacob felt cold fury building inside him. "And now that Leanna can walk and you have access to another revolutionary technology?" "Kallax might see history repeating itself," she finished. "Only this time, The technology is literally walking around my house, attached to my daughter. The implications were clear. Lena wasn't just mobile again, she was potentially in danger. Jacob closed the distance between them, taking Asara's hands in his. "I won't let anything happen to either of you." She looked up at him, vulnerability replacing her earlier anger. "You're just one human against a cerulean with vast resources and no moral constraints." "One human is all it takes sometimes," he said with quiet confidence. "We're stubborn that way." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Yes, I've noticed that particular trait." Her fingers tightened around his. "Jacob, I'm still upset about the secrecy, but I understand your reasoning better now. And I need you. Not just for the exoskeleton technology, but for this, for what might be coming." The admission clearly cost her pride. Ceruleans, he was learning, valued self-sufficiency almost as much as honesty. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, drawing her closer. "We'll protect Leanna together, and I'll never keep anything from you again." As she melted against him, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin began to pulse in a rhythm he now recognized as desire. Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, need, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. Later, tangled together in her bed, Asara traced patterns on his chest with glowing fingertips. "Humans are remarkable," she murmured. "So adaptable, so inventive. You see problems differently than we do." "Is that a compliment?" Jacob asked, smiling, as he recalled their similar conversation from nights before. "It's an observation," she replied, echoing her previous answer, "and perhaps a warning to Kallax. He has no idea what he's up against." Jacob pulled her closer, savoring the cool silk of her skin against his. Tomorrow would bring challenges, perhaps dangers. But tonight, in this moment, he had everything he never knew he wanted. A brilliant, beautiful alien woman in his arms, a remarkable child whose life he'd helped transform, and a purpose that transcended his wildest dreams. Humanity, with all its flaws and strengths, had something to offer the stars after all. Jacob woke before dawn, his mind already racing with plans. Beside him, Asara slept peacefully, her blue skin emitting a soft glow in the darkness. A cerulean trait he'd learned indicated deep contentment. He slipped from the bed carefully, not wanting to disturb her. In his makeshift lab, Jacob began working on 2 versions of the exoskeleton schematics. The first contained the actual breakthrough, his understanding of how cerulean neural pathways utilized bioluminescent signals rather than purely electrical ones. The second was a convincing fake, with a critical flaw in the interface that would cause the system to fail catastrophically if actually built. As he worked, Jacob noticed something odd about the tablet's behavior. Slight delays in processing, occasional flickering of the screen. On a hunch, he ran a security scan using a program he'd developed years ago during his research days. The results confirmed his suspicion. Someone had remotely accessed the device. "They're already watching," he muttered, shutting down the tablet and switching to analog methods. Pen and paper? Something most technologically advanced species rarely considered anymore. By the time Asara joined him, dressed impeccably for her meeting with Kallax, Jacob had swept the room and found 3 surveillance devices. "These were professionally installed," he told her, showing her the tiny bugs. "Recently, too. They're still factory fresh." Asara's expression darkened. "Kallax moves quickly." "Too quickly for this to be a reaction to Leanna walking," Jacob pointed out. "He must have been monitoring your household already." "Which means he knows about us," she said, her fingers brushing his. "About everything." Jacob nodded grimly. "I found bugs in my quarters, your study, and the main hallway. Probably more throughout the house." "What do we do?" "We give him what he wants," Jacob said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Or rather, what he thinks he wants. They spent the morning preparing, Leanna thrilled to be part of what she called the spy game, practiced walking with deliberate imperfection, allowing the occasional stumble, wincing at certain movements, while Jacob loudly discussed calibration issues within earshot of the bugs. "Remember," he told her, "we want them to think the design isn't quite perfected yet. So they'll steal the wrong version," she said, eyes bright with understanding. "Humans are sneaky." "Strategic," Jacob corrected with a wink. "And Kallax has never dealt with a human before." Meanwhile, Jacob had contacted his former research colleagues on Earth using Pax's secure communication channel, which ran on an isolated system separate from the mansion's main network. To his surprise, his old team responded with immediate enthusiasm. Cerulean neural interface technology? Are you kidding? We're in! His former lab partner, Dr. Sophia Hoffman, had practically vibrated with excitement. The applications go way beyond medical. This could revolutionize human cerulean technological integration. By noon, when Kallax's shuttle landed on the estate's private pad, Jacob had distributed the fake schematics throughout his digital files, while the real ones were safely transmitted to Earth, along with a provisional patent application listing both him and Asara as inventors. Norrin Kallax was everything Jacob expected in a villain. Tall even for a cerulean, with midnight blue skin and cold eyes that evaluated everything in terms of profit. He brought with him 4 associates, who he introduced as regulatory specialists. "Lady Asara," Kallax said smoothly, bowing with practiced elegance, "thank you for accommodating this unexpected visit. News of your daughter's miraculous recovery has reached the highest levels of the Trade Commission." "Has it?" Asara replied coolly. "I wasn't aware my daughter's medical condition was of regulatory interest." "Any breakthrough technology requires proper certification," Kallax said, his gaze sliding to Jacob, "especially when developed by unofficial sources." Jacob stepped forward, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Jacob Matthews, house assistant and, apparently, medical innovator." Kallax ignored the outstretched hand. "Yes, quite remarkable for someone with no formal cerulean medical training to succeed where our finest minds have failed." "Sometimes an outsider's perspective is exactly what's needed," Jacob replied pleasantly. "Human ingenuity and all that." One of Kallax's specialists, a nervous-looking cerulean with specialized scanning equipment, spoke up. "For certification purposes, we'll need to examine the device and its interface with the child." "Of course," Sarah said, the picture of cooperation. "Leanna is excited to demonstrate her progress. Though I should warn you, the system still has some inconsistencies." As they moved to the medical suite where Leanna waited, Jacob noticed Kallax's specialists spreading out, ostensibly examining different aspects of the mansion's technology, but clearly planting additional surveillance. He caught Sarah's eye, and she nodded slightly. She'd noticed too. The examination was a thinly veiled information-gathering operation. The specialists asked pointed questions about the neural interface, the materials used, the calibration process. Jacob answered honestly about everything except the critical breakthrough, describing conventional approaches that any medical engineer would recognize. Leanna played her part perfectly, demonstrating her walking ability with carefully choreographed stumbles. "It's still hard sometimes," she explained to a sympathetic-looking specialist. "Jacob says the interface needs fine-tuning." "Indeed," Jacob agreed, pulling up the decoy schematics on his tablet. "The connection between the luminescent neural pathways and the mechanical response still lags occasionally. I'm working on a solution, but it's tricky." He watched Kallax's eyes light up at the mention of luminescent pathways, the key insight that made the system work. The bait was taken. After 2 hours of examination, Kallax declared himself satisfied. "Most impressive, despite the obvious flaws. The Trade Commission will review our findings. In the meantime, I'd advise against any public demonstrations until proper certification is obtained." "Of course," Sarah agreed smoothly. "Leanna's health is our primary concern." As they escorted Kallax and his team back to their shuttle, Jacob felt the businessman's cold gaze assessing him one final time. "Humans are an interesting species," Kallax remarked. "So resourceful, despite your limitations." "We manage to surprise people," Jacob replied with a tight smile. That night, after confirming that Kallax's team had left at least a dozen new surveillance devices throughout the mansion, Jacob and Asara retired to the estate's garden house. The one building they'd verified was clean of bugs. "They'll make their move tonight," Jacob predicted, pacing the small structure. "The fake schematics include enough real information to be convincing, but the neural interface calibration is completely wrong. If they build it, it'll fail spectacularly." "But they won't just want the schematics," Asara pointed out, her expression troubled. "They'll want Leanna. To study how the existing interface works with her physiology?" Jacob nodded grimly. "That's why I've prepared a special welcome for our nighttime visitors." He pulled out a small device from his pocket. Remember how I said humans are strategic? We're also pretty good at setting traps. Asara's luminescent patterns flared with concern. Jacob, Kallax is dangerous. If he realizes you've deceived him, he already thinks he's deceiving us, Jacob interrupted, taking her hands in his. That's his weakness. He underestimates humans because we're younger, less technologically advanced. He doesn't understand that those limitations have made us more adaptable, more creative. Asara studied him, wonder replacing worry in her violet eyes. You're not afraid. Oh, I'm terrified, he admitted with a laugh. But humans have a long history of being at our best when we're afraid. It's kind of our thing. She moved closer, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You remarkable, impossible man. When I hired a house assistant, I never imagined finding a human who would help your daughter walk, fall in love with you, and then set a trap for your business rival? Jacob finished, pulling her against him. Love, she whispered, the luminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsing rapidly. Jacob realized what he'd said and smiled. Yeah, love. Is that okay? Her answer was a kiss that left no doubt about her feelings. Her body pressed against his with an urgency that made him forget, momentarily, about the danger they faced. Later, as they lay together on the garden house's small bed, Asara traced patterns on his chest. What happens tomorrow? After your trap springs? Then, Jacob said, kissing her forehead, we show the universe what happens when you mess with a human's family. Jacob didn't have to wait long. Just after midnight, the security system he'd modified sent a silent alert to his wrist device. 6 intruders had breached the mansion's perimeter, disabling what they thought was the main security grid. They're here, he whispered to Asara, who lay beside him in the garden house. She sat up immediately, luminescent patterns flaring with concern. Liana is safe, Jacob assured her. Remember the plan. Earlier that evening, they had moved Liana to a secure room adjacent to Asara's office, equipped with a one-way force field, standard technology, and high-security cerulean homes. More importantly, they had placed a decoy in Liana's bed, a sophisticated holographic projection that would fool the intruders long enough for Jacob's trap to spring. They watched on a secure tablet as Kallax's team, professional infiltrators by their movements, made their way through the mansion with practiced efficiency. When they reached Liana's room, 2 of them entered while the others stood guard. Now, Jacob said, activating the device in his hand. Throughout the mansion, hidden emitters released a colorless, odorless compound, harmless to humans but causing temporary paralysis in ceruleans. Jacob had synthesized it based on his research into their unique physiology. Within seconds, all 6 intruders froze in place, unable to move but fully conscious. That's our cue, Jacob said, rising and pulling on a protective mask that would filter the compound. He handed another to Asara. The effect only lasts 20 minutes. They moved quickly through the mansion to Liana's room, where they found 2 paralyzed ceruleans attempting to abduct what they thought was a sleeping child. The hologram continued to breathe peacefully, unaware of the danger. Facial recognition confirms they're Kallax Industries security personnel, Asara said, checking her device. This is all the evidence we need. Jacob nodded. Almost. We still need the big fish. As if on cue, his tablet alerted him to another approaching vehicle, a luxury shuttle landing on the private pad. Right on schedule, Kallax is coming to oversee the operation personally. Are the authorities in position? Asara asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Earth Embassy's security team is on the west perimeter. Cerulean Trade Commission enforcers are on the east. They're waiting for my signal. They returned to the garden house, watching as Norin Kallax himself entered the mansion, flanked by 2 more security personnel. The businessman's confident stride faltered when he discovered his advance team paralyzed in various positions throughout the house. What is this? They heard him demand through the surveillance feed. Report! Someone report! Jacob activated his communication device. Now! Within moments, the mansion was flooded with light as both human and cerulean authorities converged on the property. Jacob and Asara emerged from the garden house to find Kallax and his remaining guards being restrained by Trade Commission enforcers. This is outrageous, Kallax was shouting. I was invited here for a follow-up inspection. At midnight, Jacob asked pleasantly, approaching with Asara at his side. With a kidnapping team? Director Valen of the Trade Commission stepped forward, his expression grave. Norin Kalax, you are detained pending investigation of attempted kidnapping, corporate espionage, and... He glanced at a datapad. Possible connection to the sabotage of Shuttle KT-479 3 years ago. Kalax's midnight blue skin paled. That's absurd. You have no evidence. Actually, interrupted a human woman stepping forward, we have quite a bit. Dr. Sophia Hoffman, Jacob's former research partner, held up a data crystal. While your team was busy trying to steal Mr. Matthews' current work, we were accessing your company's secure archives with a warrant from both Earth and Cerulean authorities. Impossible, Kalax sputtered. Those files are encrypted beyond. Human encryption specialists, Jacob explained with a shrug, were particularly motivated when children are involved. As Kalax was led away, still protesting, Lena emerged from the house, walking confidently in her exoskeleton. She ran to Jacob and Asara, throwing her arms around them both. Did we win? She asked, her eyes bright with excitement. We did, Asara confirmed, holding her daughter close. Thanks to Jacob. Thanks to all of us, Jacob corrected, embracing his newfound family. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with surprising speed. Evidence recovered from Kalax's archives definitively linked him to the shuttle sabotage that had killed Callan and paralyzed Liena. The businessman faced multiple life sentences on Cerulean Prime, his empire dismantled and assets frozen. Meanwhile, Jacob's exoskeleton design, now properly patented under both his and Asara's names, became the foundation for a groundbreaking joint venture between Earth and Cerulean medical institutions. The technology that had given Liena back her mobility would soon help thousands of similarly injured Ceruleans across the galaxy. 1 month after Kalax's arrest, Jacob stood on the mansion's terrace watching Liena practice dance steps in the garden below. Her movements were becoming more natural each day as the neural interface adapted to her unique patterns. She wants to perform at the Cerulean Spring Festival, Asara said, joining him at the railing, a dance to honor her father's memory. She'll be ready, Jacob assured her, slipping an arm around her waist. She's the most determined person I've ever met, besides her mother. Ezra leaned into him, her skin warming against his. The Interspecies Medical Board approved our proposal this morning. The Matthews-Thalia neural interface will begin clinical trials next month. Matthews-Thalia, Jacob repeated, savoring the sound of their names joined together. I like it. I thought you might. She turned to face him, violet eyes serious. There's something else we need to discuss. Something important about Cerulean customs. Jacob raised an eyebrow. More cultural differences I should know about? In a way, her luminescent patterns formed intricate designs he'd never seen before. Nervousness, perhaps? When a Cerulean chooses a life partner from another species, tradition requires a formal bonding ceremony before the High Council. Jacob's heart skipped. Are you proposing to me? Is that the human term? Then yes, I suppose I am. A smile played at her lips. Unless you find the idea of being permanently bonded to an alien millionaire and her formerly paralyzed daughter too daunting. Jacob laughed, pulling her close. Daunting is what humans do best. It's kind of our specialty. Their kiss was interrupted by Liena's voice from the garden. Finally. Does this mean Jacob is officially my dad now? They broke apart, laughing, to find Liena standing below them with her hands on her hips, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. If he wants to be, Asara called back. Nothing would make me prouder, Jacob answered, his voice thick with emotion. Later that night, as Asara slept beside him, Jacob reflected on the strange path that had led him here. 6 months ago, he'd been a failed researcher with dwindling prospects, taking a job as a house assistant out of desperation. Now he was about to become part of a Cerulean family, the co-founder of a revolutionary medical technology company, and, most importantly, a father to a remarkable young girl who had taught him as much as he taught her. He thought of that pivotal moment when Asara had dropped her plate in shock, seeing her daughter walk for the first time in years. It had changed everything, not just for Liena, but for all of them. Jacob Matthews, ordinary human, had done what the finest Cerulean medical minds couldn't, not because he was smarter or more advanced, but because he approached problems differently. Because humans, for all their limitations and flaws, possessed an ingenuity born from millennia of overcoming obstacles. As he drifted toward sleep, Jacob smiled. Sometimes all the universe needed was one determined human with the right idea at the right time. Humanity, for the win.